Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, December 1st. I'm Corey and this is CMBG News. In today's top stories, European Central Bank President Mario Draghi says to proceed with caution. European stocks fell and the euro slipped against the dollar after comments by European Central Bank President Mario Draghi were laced with caution, which didn't necessarily coincide with the positive sentiments following Wednesday's coordinated liquidity moves by central banks. Draghi, speaking to the European Parliament on the joint measures by banks, warned that downside risks to the economic outlook have increased. The important point, however, is whether Europe is going to have a bigger bailout fund, which is vital to keeping the crisis from engulfing the continent's biggest economies. Can fighting climate change save money in the long run? The UN's top climate scientist Rajendra Pachauri cautioned climate negotiators Wednesday that global warming is leading to human dangers and soaring financial costs, but containing carbon emissions will have a host of benefits. In his summary of potential disasters, Pachauri said heat waves currently experienced once every 20 years will happen every other year by the end of the century. Within a decade, up to 250 million people will face the stress of scarce water. But the scientist said many impacts can be avoided, reduced, or delayed by reducing emissions. To stabilize carbon concentrations in the atmosphere would slow economic growth by 0.12% per year, he said, but those costs would be offset by improved health, greater energy security, and more secure food supplies. Herman Cain is set to make a decision about whether to stay in the presidential race. Herman Cain said he will decide within a week whether to remain in the race for the Republican presidential nomination and plans to consult with family this weekend after allegations of an extramarital affair surfaced earlier this week. A week from now, I will have made a final decision, Cain said on Fox News Wednesday afternoon. In the interview, Cain said, obviously my wife was very disappointed and hurt by the allegations. Cain said as he was considering whether to remain in the race. His top priority would be the sentiments of his family, followed by whether or not voters and donors were sticking with the campaign. This is a decision I have to make based on the feedback from my family and the people I talk to. Former Penn State coach Jerry Sandusky faces his first lawsuit. The 29-year-old, identified only as John Doe, had never told anyone about the abuse he claims he suffered until Sandusky was charged this month with abusing other boys. His lawyer said he filed a complaint with law enforcement on Tuesday. He became the first plaintiff to file suit in the Penn State child sex abuse scandal a day later. The lawsuit alleges Sandusky abused the boy from 1992, when the boy was 10, until 1996 in encounters at the coach's State College home, in a Penn State locker room, and on trips, including a bowl game. The account echoes a grand jury's description of trips, gifts, and attention lavished on other boys. The lawsuit seeks tens of thousands of dollars and names Sandusky, the university, and Sandusky's Second Mile charity as defendants. The man says he knew the coach through the charity, which Sandusky founded in 1977. In a related story, according to law enforcement officials, federal agents have searched the campus office of former Syracuse assistant basketball coach Bernie Fine as part of the investigation of child molestation allegations against him. Fine's office at the Carmelo K. Anthony Basketball Center was searched early Tuesday morning, according to the person who spoke to the Associated Press, on the condition of anonymity because of its ongoing investigation. The U.S. Secret Service already searched Fine's house last Friday. Federal prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office in northern New York, which is leading the investigation, would not say what they sought or found there, saying it was under seal. The warrant approving the search of his office was also under seal. 3 men, including 2 former Syracuse ball boys, have accused Fine of molesting them as children. He has denied the allegations. The university fired him Sunday after a third accuser went public, and ESPN broadcast a 2002 audio tape obtained and recorded by accuser Bobby Davis of a conversation between Davis and a woman ESPN identified as Fine's wife, Lori, in which she says she knew everything that went on. The evangelist Billy Graham spent the night in the hospital. The Reverend Billy Graham was admitted to a hospital Wednesday near his home in western North Carolina to be tested for pneumonia after suffering from congestion, a cough, and slight fever, his spokesman said. A news release issued by the hospital said Graham was alert, smiling and waving to staff as he entered the hospital. For 6 decades, Graham led a worldwide crusade-based ministry that packed stadiums with believers and allowed him to counsel every U.S. president since Harry Truman. His most recent book, Nearing Home, was published last month. Did you know your cell phone may be spying on you? Well, apparently the same technology that lets you stay in touch on the go can now let others tap your private world, yes, your spouse or your boss, without you ever suspecting anything. A new generation of cell phone spying tools is making eavesdropping easy. All it takes is a 2-minute conversation install, and someone with a record can record your calls and monitor your text messages. They can even set up systems to be automatically alerted when you dial a certain number, then instantly patched into your conversation. What might startle you is that your cell phone can do this when you aren't even using it. For now, the only surefire form of protection is to keep a close guard on your phone. Don't accept Bluetooth connections unless you know what they are. Most importantly, make sure no one has access to install something when you aren't watching. Otherwise, they may soon be watching you when you least expect it. Well, apparently the IRS is sitting on top of an awful lot of cash that may belong to you. The Internal Revenue Service has $153 million in undelivered tax refund checks looking for the right homes. The agency says they are 99,123 taxpayers to whom the checks weren't delivered because it had the wrong mailing address. The returned checks average $1,547 apiece. It's an annual exercise for the IRS, which has been nudging taxpayers toward accepting their refunds through direct electronic deposits to their bank accounts. Out of the nearly 103 million refunds the IRS issued through early June this year, 76 million were direct deposits. Of those delivered by the mail, about 0.3% bounced back to the IRS because of return address problems. Taxpayers hoping to claim their refund check can click on Check Your Refund link at www.irs.gov or call 1-800-829-1954. You're now up to date with today's headlines. We'll be right back after these brief messages. And welcome back to CMBG News. I'm Corey Manuel. In world news today, federal agents in California have uncovered the most sophisticated drug tunnel in years. The latest discovery in what an official has said has become a major phenomenon in the war on drugs. A spokesperson for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement declined to give details on the tunnel, which ran from Tijuana to San Diego. The tunnel was discovered by San Diego's Tunnel Task Force in cooperation with Mexican authorities. The task force, whose sole job is to uncover drug smuggling tunnels, is made up of agents from ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and the Drug Enforcement Administration. More than 70 tunnels have been discovered by federal authorities since October 2008, according to the report by the Associated Press, which first reported the new find. Earlier this month, U.S. authorities nabbed 14 tons of marijuana from warehouses connected by a drug tunnel from Mexico to South San Diego. That tunnel was built with structural support and had the electric lighting and ventilation. Could the change of weather be putting a damper on Occupy protests? The overnight police raids in Philadelphia and Los Angeles that dismantled two of the nation's biggest Occupy Wall Street encampments leave just a few major occupations still going on around the U.S. But activists are already changing tactics and warning of a winter of discontent, with rallies and marches every week. The camps may bloom again in the spring, organizers said, and next summer could bring huge demonstrations at the Republican and Democratic conventions when the whole world is watching. But for now, they are promoting dozens of smaller actions, such as picketing the president in New York and staging sit-ins at homes marked for foreclosure. On Wednesday, Max Sanitation workers hauled away 25 tons of debris from the lawns around Los Angeles City Hall after police raided the protesters' camp in the middle of the night and arrested more than 300 people. In Philadelphia, dozens of police patrolled a plaza outside City Hall after sweeping it of demonstrators and arresting 50. In the past few weeks, police broke up encampments in such cities as Portland, Oregon, Oakland, California, and New York, where the sit-down protests against social inequality and corporate excesses began in mid-September. Demonstrators are still at it in places like Boston and Washington, which each had encampments of about 100 tents Wednesday. Dozens of protesters are fighting eviction from a community college campus in Seattle. Could China's secret military branch be exposed? The Chinese have called it their underground Great Wall, a vast network of tunnels designed to hide their country's increasingly sophisticated missile and nuclear arsenals. For the past 3 years, a small band of obsessively dedicated students at Georgetown University has called it something else: homework. Led by their hard-charging professor, a former top Pentagon official, they have translated hundreds of documents, combed through satellite imagery, obtained restricted Chinese military documents, and waded through hundreds of gigabytes of online data. The result of their effort? The largest body of public knowledge about thousands of miles of tunnels dug by the 2nd Artillery Corps, a secretive branch of the Chinese military in charge of protecting and deploying its ballistic missiles and nuclear warheads. The study is yet to be released, but already it has sparked a congressional hearing and has been circulated among top officials at the Pentagon, including the Air Force Vice Chief of Staff. Like plenty of other cable news talk show hosts, Greta Van Susteren anchored a segment on her top-rated Fox News show Tuesday, assessing, among other things, the future of Herman Cain's presidential candidacy in the wake of the allegation that Cain had a 13-year affair with a woman from Atlanta, Georgia. But unlike plenty of other cable news talk show hosts, Van Susteren had an important relationship to the story and to the Cain campaign. Her husband, prominent Washington lawyer John Cole, is now acting as an advisor to Cain. Van Susteren did not disclose her husband's relationship to Cain on the air, opting instead to alert readers in a post on GretaWire.com that Cole's relationship with Cain is not an ethical issue because the Cain campaign is not paying him. She also maintained that the Cain alliance is pretty much par for the course for people living inside the Beltway. Bill Shine, Fox News EVP of Programming, said that Van Susteren's disclosure in a blog post and not on air was sufficient, and that he's comfortable with the decision to address her husband's relationship there. Van Susteren's On the Record draws an average of 1.5 million viewers a night for Fox News, according to Nielsen Media Research. The monthly traffic to GretaWire.com is too small to be estimated. Following the 2008 presidential campaign, Van Susteren was subjected to similar criticism for not disclosing her husband's relationship with former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, who also sought political advice. The top U.S. military officer told Reuters on Wednesday he did not know whether Israel would alert the United States ahead of time if it decided to take military action against Iran. General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also acknowledged differences in the perspective between the United States and Israel over the best way to handle Iran and its nuclear program. He said the United States was convinced that sanctions and diplomatic pressure was the right path to take on Iran, along with the stated intent not to take any options off the table, language that leaves open the possibility of future military action. Iran is facing new sanctions after the International Atomic Energy Agency reported earlier in November that Tehran appears to have worked on designing a bomb and may still be conducting secret research to that end. Iran says its nuclear program is peaceful. The sanctions push got added momentum on Wednesday as diplomatic sources said Britain would support its embargo on Iranian oil imports. By Iran, it seeks its nuclear program as the source of power and prestige, and it is unclear whether sanctions will alter its cost-benefit analysis. There has been concern that if world powers cannot nudge Iran into serious nuclear negotiations, then Israel, which feels threatened by Iranian nuclear aspirations, will attack. Asked directly whether Israel would alert the United States ahead of time if it chose to go forward with military action, Dempsey replied flatly, "I don't know." Egyptians will hear results of their first free election in 6 decades on Thursday, with the Muslim Brotherhood expecting to pick up 2/5 of the vote for an assembly that might limit the power of the generals. The Brotherhood, Egypt's oldest and best organized Islamic group, hopes its new Freedom and Justice Party will secure a solid platform in parliament, saying it hopes to form a coalition government once polls are over in January. The ruling military council, under increasing pressure to make way for civilian rule, has said it will retain powers to choose or dismiss a cabinet, but the FJP leader said on Tuesday the majority in parliament should form the government. The last government resigned during protests against army rule last month, in which 42 people were killed, mainly around Cairo's Tahrir Square, the center of the revolt that overthrew President Hosni Mubarak. Protesters who returned to Ireland last month, angered by the military's apparent reluctance to cede power, say the general should step aside now. "We want the military council to leave," said Heidi Assam, a 21-year-old law student. "We're not leaving Tahrir even if we have to stay for months until we get a transitional government." Officials plan to announce on Thursday the outcome of contests for individual seats in the first stage of an election staggered over 6 weeks, but not those of the 2/3 of seats allocated to party lists, which will be made public in January. This and more news coming up right here on CMBG News after this short break. And welcome back to CMBG News. I'm Corey Manuel. In world news today, 7 Syrian soldiers were killed by army renegades on Wednesday as regional pressure tightened on President Bashar al-Assad, with Turkey imposing tough economic sanctions. The conflict, which began in spring as a crackdown on peaceful anti-government protests, now appears to be sliding towards civil war. Soldiers are defecting with their weapons to take on Assad loyalist troops. Piling pressure on Assad, Syria's biggest trade partner, Turkey, suspended all financial credit dealings with Damascus and froze its assets, joining the Arab League in isolating Assad over the military crackdown. Washington urged other states to follow suit. The world's largest Islamic body, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, urged Syria on Wednesday to immediately stop the use of excessive force against its citizens to avert the threat of foreign intervention. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said clashes erupted in the southern town of Dael when security forces moved in during the early morning and continued well into afternoon. An activist from the town in the province of Daraa said some 30 busloads of security men had stormed into Dael, but 2 of the buses were blown up in fighting between security forces and defectors. 1 bus had been emptied. In the north of Syria, at least 6 civilians were shot dead on Wednesday when security forces broke up an anti-government demonstration in the city of Idlib. Hundreds of thousands of public sector workers went on strike in Britain on Wednesday to protest over pension reform and a walkout billed by unions as the biggest in a generation, but derided by Prime Minister David Cameron as a damp squib. Unions and the government were each quick to claim victory, with labor leaders saying up to 2 million teachers, nurses, border guards, and other workers took part. The government disputed the turnout and played down the strike's impact. The government said the union's turnout claim was wrong and the true figure was significantly less. Unions hit back, reaffirming their 2 million figure and rejecting again government public sector pension reforms they say will force people to work longer before they can retire and pay more for pensions that will be worth less. The government, trying to turn around a debt-laden economy teetering on the brink of recession, says reform is needed as people are living longer and public service pensions are unaffordable. The chairman of Jamaica's governing party has resigned from the cabinet over allegations that his ministry has mismanaged a sprawling $400 million road program financed by China. Transport and Works Minister Mike Henry announced his resignation in a late Tuesday statement, citing ongoing attacks on the management of the Jamaica Development Infrastructure Program, a 5-year initiative launched in 2010 with loans from China to upgrade roadways. Henry said he has nothing to hide and looks forward to the conclusion of an independent review ordered by Prime Minister Andrew Holness, who has assumed responsibility for the project. Henry still holds considerable power as chairman of Jamaica Labour Party, though that deputy chairman, Agriculture Minister Robert Montague, is challenging him in upcoming internal election. The late Steve Jobs is being honored in Hungary. Hungary's postal service says it has issued a numbered commemorative sheet incorporating a stamp-sized image of Steve Jobs in memory of the co-founder of Apple, who died in October. Mangra Pasta said Wednesday that 5,000 copies of the memorial set have been issued, selling for about $4.40 each. The sheet includes a perforated portrait of Jobs, while an accompanying card shows silhouettes of some of the inventor's characteristic poses and a quote about Jobs by Erno Rubik, the Hungarian architect who created Rubik's Cube and other mechanical puzzles. A Budapest software company is planning to unveil a Jobs statue in December. Jobs died at age 56 on October 5th after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. The commemorative sheet cannot be used to pay for posters. The U.S. businessman, who spent nearly 4 months in an Aruban jail before a judge ordered his release, scored another legal victory Wednesday when an appeals court rejected a prosecution appeal to put him back in pretrial detention. Gary Giordano had already left Aruba when the 3-judge appeals court panel ruled that prosecutors lacked sufficient evidence to continue holding him as a suspect in a disappearance and presumed death of his traveling companion, Robin Gardner. The prosecutor's office said it was disappointed with the ruling, still considers Giordano a suspect, and is continuing to pursue the case with the assistance of the FBI. Prosecutors had said that they intended to seek the extradition of Giordano,
a 50-year-old from Gattinsburg, Maryland, if they had won the appeal. Now they can only try to bring him back to the island and detain him if they intend to bring the case to trial, said Chris Laguez, a Rubin defense attorney. Moving over to business news, higher incentives and better model selection in November led to the best month for U.S. auto sales in more than 2 years. The annualized sales rate for November is expected to be 13.4 million. This will be the best showing since August 2009, when the U.S. government launched its Cash for Clunkers auto rebate program. If projections hold, November will be the third straight month the annualized sales rate will top 13 million. Analysts say November sales were also up due to pickup truck sales, spurred by lower fuel prices and greater demand from business owners. The improved performance comes as the industry recovers from the March earthquake in Japan, which triggered vehicle shortages that hollowed out dealer inventories and depressed sales during the summer. Other analysts caution that the recent performance of U.S. auto sales, which comes amid mounting concerns about the health of the U.S. economy, may be a function of so-called deferred demand. While sales are strong now, we are still witnessing the deferred demand from the summer months, so we cannot expect this sales level to be considered the new normal, Edmunds.com analyst Jessica Caldwell had to say. Clearwire Corporation is expected to reach a funding agreement with Sprint Nextel at least by year end, and possibly in time for Clearwire's December 1st debt interest payment deadline. Clearwire, majority owned by Sprint, is seeking almost $1 billion in new financing to keep operating and to pay for a network upgrade that is crucial for it to complete in the U.S. market for high-speed wireless services. A source familiar with the situation said on Wednesday, a day ahead of the deadline for a $237 million debt interest payment, that Clearwire was optimistic it could reach a funding deal with Sprint, but details were still being worked out. Sprint and Clearwire declined to comment. The company had $711 million in cash at the end of the third quarter. But Clearwire's chief executive, Eric Prush, told the Wall Street Journal earlier this month that the company was considering skipping the payment due on December 1st, prompting its stock to fall as much as 31%. Some analysts saw his comments as a little more than a negotiating tactic in Clearwire's discussions with Sprint, which is in addition being a majority owner, is also Clearwire's biggest customer. The company's tempestuous relationship came to a head on October 7th when comments by Sprint suggesting that Clearwire bankruptcy could be constructive caused Clearwire investors to flee. Since then, the companies have said they are working on an extension of their network agreement for services beyond 2012 when their current pact expires. Bankruptcy will help American Airlines slash costs, but Chapter 11 is not a silver bullet for operational problems that dropped American from its top position among U.S. carriers to number 3 in the last few years, experts say. The AMR Corporation unit declared bankruptcy on Tuesday, citing a cost structure that put it at a disadvantage against rivals. The company has not set a target for cost savings, but says everything is on the table and that it will be more efficient post-bankruptcy. American has long complained its labor costs in particular are higher than those of competitors such as United Airlines and Delta Airlines that restructured in bankruptcy and later found merger partners. United bought Continental Airlines and Delta bought Northwest Airlines. But American also operates an aircraft fleet featuring out-of-date and inefficient aircraft that carriers still leases. AMR said in court documents it wants to shed unwanted leases for 24 aircraft. In a related story, American Airlines, which is slipping further behind beefed-up rivals United and Delta, could bulk up through a merger with U.S. Airways. That idea has been floating around before, but it's most likely now that American's parent company, AMR Corporation, has filed for bankruptcy protection, some analysts had to say. American will use the bankruptcy process to reduce debt and cut costs that it made untouchable. American and U.S. Airways declined to comment on whether they would consider a merger or have talked about it. History suggests they will. U.S. Airways CEO Doug Parker, whose company is the product of a merger during bankruptcy, is a longtime advocate of such combinations. His airline has approached rivals several times over the years about potential tie-ups. In April, Parker said that if United, Delta, or American wanted to make a deal, his was the last one left among the biggest airlines. Just 3 years ago, American bragged about being the biggest airline in the world. It could reclaim that perch or come very close to it by merging with U.S. Airways. The combined company would leapfrog over Delta Airlines and would rival United Continental for first place in passenger traffic. AMR and U.S. Airways had combined 2010 revenue of $34 billion, about $2 billion more than Delta. You're now up to date this hour. We'll be back right after these short messages.